Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chana Lee, and I teach in the History Department and in the African American Studies program. I'm also the faculty coordinator for the History of Slavery project here on campus, and also a committee member on the Symposium Planning Committee. Welcome to Below and Beyond Baldwin, the 12th session of History of Slavery at UGA, a virtual symposium on recognition, reconciliation, and redress. Most of you probably already know that Baldwin refers to Baldwin Hall, a North Campus home to the departments of anthropology, religion, sociology, and other units. For those who don't, let me recall briefly what happened beginning in late fall of 2015. It was at Baldwin Hall that construction workers uncovered a burial ground while beginning work on the building's expansion. Eventually, authorities located 105 grave sites. In January 2017, the school announced that DNA test results suggested African-American ancestry. On March 7th, the school reburied the remains without notifying the public. To add insult to injury, the remains were placed in Oconee Hill Cemetery, formerly segregated burial place that was the final resting place for the possible enslavers of the people to whom those remains belong. On March 25th, over 350 people packed the Russell Library Auditorium, many of them expressing their outrage. There had been no community consultation on either the removal or the reburial. School officials dedicated a memorial at Baldwin Hall on November 6, 2018. In general, it was these sequence of events that accounts for this symposium. Joining us today, we have five individuals who've had some involvement with what I'll just call the Baldwin Hall matter. Among them is Mr. Fred O. Smith Sr., a retired district director of the Georgia Department of Labor, serving more than 30 years in state government. He is an active community advocate, serving 2 terms as president of the local NAACP chapter, co-founding and serving as co-president of the Creative Visions Foundation, and was a founding board member of the Athens Tutorial Program. Smith co-founded the Athens Area Black History Bowl, an academic competition for grades 5 through 12. He was named 2016 Partner of the Year by the Athens Land Trust and received the 2017 President's Fulfilling the Dream Award from the University of Georgia. He holds a bachelor's in sociology from Payne College in Augusta and a master's in journalism and mass communication from UGA. Also joining the panel is Ms. Linda Davis, educator, preservationist, and co-convener of Athens Community Agenda. I also I should add that she's a key member of the planning committee. We then have Joe Lavine, a healing artist and documentary filmmaker living in Athens. An Atlanta native, he graduated from Grady, now Midtown High School, and attended the University of Georgia, where he received bachelor's degrees in sociology and journalism. He began directing and editing the documentary Below Baldwin in his final semester before graduating. Since then, Joe has been working with Enlightened Media Productions to help coordinate emergent community-led stories. Alongside beloved community, Joe intends to continue diagnosing and destabilizing the diseases of whiteness and accumulation while using collective storytelling to fall deeper into honest expression, joy, and dignity. Then we have students who belong to Beyond Baldwin, a student-led activist group with a list of demands aimed to push the University of Georgia towards racial justice. Beyond Baldwin has requested that UGA recognize past injustices perpetrated by the institution and address current manifestations of injustice rooted in those past events. In this session, members of Beyond Baldwin will discuss the background of how the group was formed, their experiences working within the UGA community and dealing with administrators. We will then envision a just University of Georgia and strategize about how to build momentum. Representing the group is Phaidra Buchanan, a senior at the University of Georgia, where she is pursuing a BS in education. She helped examine the university's role in the institution of slavery. Yes, she was one of our all-star researchers, and studied the lived experiences of enslaved people connected to the university as a member of the History of Slavery research team. Buchanan volunteers with an organization working to ensure equal access to higher education for students of immigrant families, and has researched how prospective teachers like herself conceptualize culturally responsive teaching practices. She plans a career as a teacher who fosters criticality, compassion, and joy, and as an advocate for policies that empower students and community. Buchanan is a founding member of Beyond Baldwin. Also joining her is Kyle Patel, a fourth-year undergraduate student at the University of Georgia studying biology, international affairs, and public health. His passions for politics and advocacy include work with Moms Demand Action for gun violence prevention and criminal justice reform with the Athens anti-discrimination movement. He hopes to eventually become a physician and practice community-based medicine that emphasizes a holistic vision of healthcare. He is another founding member of Beyond Baldwin. I thought what we would do is to start off and allow all of you to kind of share your memory of that moment when you first learned about the uncovering of remains at Baldwin. And I put emphasis on the uncovering part because our symposium committee reminded me that this was hardly a discovery. They knew that people had been buried there and removed before. Tell me, what are your recollections of that initial moment when you learned about this? Fred, you want to start?
I'll be glad to. Thank you, Dr. Chana Lee and the committee for all the hard work that you have done to get us at this place. We've come a long ways, but not very far also in terms of where we need to go in terms of studying American and real slavery in Athens. I recall very well of how I reacted when I learned that some human remains had been uncovered at the University of Georgia. I was in Augusta, and often I had family there, and I'm kind of a newspaper person, and so somewhere between Augusta and Athens, I bought an Atlanta Constitution. And so the night before I went to bed, I used to go through the newspaper. But when I read that, it was almost bedtime for me. I was fully awakened when I saw the headline to some effect about construction at UGA recovering human remains. Because for me, it dates back farther than that. It dates back to 1978 when I was a student in the graded school. And also I read in the newspaper, in the red and black, about a story about the cemetery, and it noted in that article that in 1938, it quoted former Dean Tate. He indicated that when Baldwin Hall was constructed in 1938, human remains were removed from the site and buried somewhere near the Athens waterworks. And being, having a strong interest in history, that was something that struck me at that time. And so when you fast forward to 2015 and that story came out, of course, when I read the headline, my initial reaction was, of course, these are some more enslaved people. But when I read on, and when I did further reading and probably maybe Googled some articles, I noted that the official statement from UGA indicated that they were not of African descent. And so then I became somewhat alarmed because having grown up in the South, and understanding that African Americans and white folks were not buried in the same cemetery. So I knew that there was a strong possibility that these were enslaved people. And so immediately I began what initially was a one-person campaign. Anyone who would listen, including Linda Davis, who probably got a call from me soon thereafter, I expressed my concern and noted about what I had read back in 1978. And so then I felt disrespected. I felt like UGA, the University of Georgia, was in a way was trying to pull a fast one, so to speak, that UGA was trying to suggest that they were not of African descent because they did not want to hear from people like me. And I'm from the beginning, I was sure that they knew. And even though it had been, a number of years, you don't forget that a place was a burial place. And so I'm gonna stop there, but I was in a way excited when I read the headline because it was okay. Here's some more news or something else about enslaved people in Athens. But then when by the time I read the article, I was upset.
Okay, Fred, they may have problems seeing the bottom of your mouth. Can you adjust the? Okay, that's great. That's great. Miss Linda, what are your memories of that initial moment? Oh,
Thank you. I'm sorry. The initial moment upon learning that there were remains underneath Baldwin Hall, it was an affirmation for me that this was definitely, these were not European remains. This is definitely a part of the old cemetery. And I learned of that cemetery's existence through the history of First AME Church. Dr. Robert Harrison had written about that cemetery as a part of the expansion of the depot in Athens, Clark County. So like Fred, I absolutely knew that these were definitely not European descent. And also their positioning. They're downhill from the portion of the cemetery that has been fenced off and maintained. And so that's always a clue to me when I'm driving through. And I'm a little bit weird in terms of I do visit museums and I visit cemeteries because I just find so much history there. And so there's so much there. So that's something that I do routinely. So yes, everything there pointed to me that these were indeed African Americans. And then I got excited because I know that historically on my maternal grandmother's side of the family, they were from Clark and Lexington, Georgia, and whatever that little county is over in there. And so the possibility of being able to locate someone on that side of the family was just fascinating to me. So.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm not being a good moderator. I forgot to mention that. Please, attendees, submit any questions you may have. Use the Q&A box, and we'll have time to address those. Joe, I want to ask you to share your memory as well, and I want to add to that. If you can talk about how you came to begin to think about below Baldwin, the planning involved with that. At what moment did you think, okay, there's something here that I need to represent?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Dr. Chana. It's an honor to be here with all y'all. So yeah, it's funny when you ask that because I'm thinking back and I don't recall being aware of what was going on until like 2017, like spring of 2017. And that's saying something because not only was I a UGA student, I was also attending classes almost every day in Baldwin Hall and possibly even walking through that parking lot and just was unaware. And I'm sure many students and even faculty, staff, and administrators probably have had a similar experience. But yeah, I became aware in 2017, really when the news started coming out about, like, when it was confirmed that the remains were people of African descent. And and the memorial was happening, and people like Fred and Linda and others were speaking out about the lack of community consultation. And I think, like, what really got to me was the omission of truth and the distortion of the truth coming out of the university. And if you read the police report for George Floyd's murder, that reads pretty similarly in a lot of ways to a lot of the statements coming out from the university from around that time. I want to thank Irami Ose Frimpong for helping make that connection. Just the omission. They say that propaganda in a liberal democracy is done by omission. And the omission is just what was really getting to me, just that distortion of the truth. And it really, it really told me, like, this is something that I have to, like, I need to be involved in this somehow. Something about just, like, I felt like there was just that kind of deep neglect of the truth, and just wanting to be a part of like getting that out and, like, really addressing that. And so in 2017, I tried to kind of pursue that just on my own. I think I might have reached out to Fred and Dr. Valerie Babb, and it just, for whatever reason, didn't really go anywhere. And then time passed, and in 2018, I was part of a documentary production class with Dr. Taylor Miller, and Baldwin Hall was one of 5 topics available to us as a class. And I was like, okay, this is it. And I was very enthusiastic at first. Of course, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I just am really grateful at just, like, the grace and authenticity of people like Fred and Linda and all others who are involved, just in sharing their story, and, like, also giving me and others, like, the trust to help share that story. So yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Joe, and I know so many other people thank you as well. And one of our committee members, Kimberly, wanted me to point out that the showing at the Morton Theater was tremendous, and that people turned out in such numbers. And I think that, you know, a lot of credit goes to you in terms of this whole issue going someplace, which is why, you know, I'm still very curious about kind of the power of documentary to do something like that. And I mean, you really pulled it off. I can't say enough about that. So thank you. I want to turn to our undergraduates here who are representing us. I imagine that for both of you, probably you were just getting here maybe when you first heard about it. Tell me what you thought when you first heard about it, and also at what moment did you decide I have to do something? And how did you come to Beyond Baldwin as that something you had to do? Phaidra?
Okay, I can speak from.
Oh, you want to share your screen now or later?
A little bit later, but thank you.
Okay.
First of all, thanks, Dr. Lee, and thank you to everybody who's here. It's really exciting to see all of you. in the participants list. I had a very similar experience to Joe's. I just got there in fall of 2017. I had no idea what was going on. I was taking political science classes in Baldwin Hall, and I had not heard anything. My sister was starting to be mentored by Dr. Diane Batts-Morrow in the history department, actually both Morrows. And she would come, we were roommates, and she would come home and tell me about what she was hearing about. And I'm just sitting there like, they found who at the where? Goes back to the parking lot, stares at it for a while, tried to find more information on my own. I think I skipped class to watch Below Baldwin in somebody else's class, and told literally everyone I knew, because yes, the discovery itself was shocking and learning about that was shocking, but it was also just uncovering the layers of the university response to it, which I was also not aware of. That was shocking to me. I think during that time, I saw my involvement as, okay, I can attend the MLK Freedom Breakfast and be in these student advisory groups, and I'm gonna give back, and we're gonna justice and nice that. The experience of watching the activism, a lot of people on this call speaking out and how they were responded to by the university, it both inspired me and it gave me a reality check that I needed to get more involved and I needed to do more. And I just wanted to take a second to thank all of you who were involved in those early days when I had no idea what was going on, because I could not have been a part of the history of slavery research without you. I would not have gotten as involved without you. And it was really inspiring to me. And I hope I can pay that forward. And I think that's what inspired a lot of the students with Beyond Baldwin. We were people who had been really involved in UGA in very more official ways, and watching you all sort of galvanized us into coming together. But that was my experience.
Okay. Kyle, I already knew Phaidra, but I think I feel like I know you by reputation. You're quite the outspoken person and involved person, so it's a pleasure to meet you. Tell me what's your memory.
Yes, you as well, Dr. Lee. And just like Phaidra said, it's an honor to be with all of you. You are the shoulders that we stand on to do our work. So similar, very similar to what Phaidra said. I hadn't heard of this at all. In fact, I don't think I'd heard of it until like 2018. And how I found out was, I think there was a screening of Below Baldwin happening somewhere, and one of my friends invited me to it. So I went and I saw, and then I was reading some red and black articles, and I think it was developing at this time, like the whole university response, like going back on what they were saying and coming out with new things, and then the commemoration that they thought was going to appease everyone. So I guess I was just following that and shocked that something like this occurred. But I guess what like most shocked me was that as a student, and similar to like Joe and Phaidra, like I had walked by Baldwin Hall so many times and seen it, that I just had no idea that this was happening. And the only reason I heard about it was because I was somewhat involved with organizing, and I knew people who were, and they were the ones who told me, but none of my other friends knew about it, and no one in my classes or anywhere else had been talking about it. And I think to this day, there are still many UJ students who have no idea, who walk by Baldwin Hall every single day and take classes there, that don't know anything about what happened there. And there is that memorial, but unless you know what happened, you can't really make any sense of it. So that, I think, was the most shocking thing. And that was one of the influencing factors last summer when we formed Beyond Baldwin. I think we wanted to bring in student voices to carry forward the work that had already been done by so many community members, and just get students involved and educated and mobilized about these issues, because there are things happening on campus that they have no idea about. And we thought it was very important as students, and having that privilege as students, as going to the university, to hold the administration, but also the broader institution accountable. And so that's kind of what informed our thinking and why we formed our group.
Yeah, I'm always struck by how many of my undergraduates still don't know. And when I give them sort of the brief version in class, what also I find to be really moving and almost heartbreaking is the real disappointment on their faces. They want their school to be seen as good. It's important for them to think well of the institution. And when we talk about that, they're like, what? Why? So I mean, you know, they have to learn, obviously, but yeah, I'm just really struck by huge disappointment that seems to come over them in their facial expressions. So where are we now with Baldwin? You all can just sort of describe what has happened since then for you, your involvement. What are you most concerned about that has not happened?
I
What are
think,
your thoughts?
yeah, I think to a degree, I use the word disrespect a lot. It's still there. Like I say, this event yesterday and today is a step in the right direction, but the disrespect, the deep understanding of the humanity of all people, and particularly enslaved folks, I still don't think that people generally get it. You know, for me, this was very emotional and still in some sense. Living the mission, the fact that our ancestors, our forefathers were here at the time when UGA started. We can trace our enslaved ancestors back to that point, in fact. And so, and for African Americans, in terms of when I grew up, we didn't hardly talk about Black history. We didn't even talk about slavery, you know. And so, to me, that's why that struck me so much. I think when I was in that journalism building, I read that newspaper because it was bringing it kind of close, right across the street. Some enslaved people were buried. And so there was a lot of things that really struck me. That was the initial reaction from some of the UGA officials in terms of being excited about finding remains so that they could study them. And that really, you know, got me. And then one of the most heartbreaking stories, emotional event that I witnessed when I talked with some of the service workers in Baldwin Hall, the maids, the janitors who were there, again, in a disrespectful way because nobody gave any, didn't talk to them about that, but they knew what was going on. So they saw it. They saw the remains being brought up. They told me stories, some that I haven't even told, about the fact that they was brought up and they was laid out, and you know, as they was collecting them, and they told me, and I don't know whether I believe it's true, because why would they lie, that they were placed in the basement in Baldwin Hall and it flooded. And again, but to me, and I could see the emotion, their minds too, because to us, these are like our relatives, right? Could be human beings, first of all. And so I don't think people get it. And again, even today, I don't know what a better way to identify that site, but to me, in a way, it's disrespectful to recall that site in terms of Baldwin, right? It's an enslaved people cemetery. Right.
Wow.
Right.
Sacred ground, hallowed ground. Thank you.
Right. It's an enslaved people cemetery. And then it's this that, and then there's the story about, you know, Baldwin, who is actually the father of the University of Georgia, the founder, who was brought down from Yale to write the charter, etc. And then it really is kind of still heartbreaking that so now it's that site and all of this is kind of Baldwin. But I kind of understand you got to have some some current frame of reference. So Baldwin Hall is on the enslaved cemetery. And so I often repeat this because it's kind of strange that at University of Georgia, the building that is named after the founder of the University of Georgia is on an enslaved people cemetery. The other part about that too, and this is still disappointing, is that of course there was an attempt to and it was intentional that students did not really know what was going on, and a lot of other people didn't know what was going on, and that they were trying to paint this picture of they accidentally found some human remains, and they did the right thing, et cetera, and now we can move on. But in the end, I'll be honest with you, after a lot of back and forth and discussion, but in the end, that final report that UGA issued, I was pretty much pleased with it because I would say 98% of it, it told the truth. So the truth is that they know, and of course we always knew, that there are still human remains there. There's still enslaved people there. And they admitted it in the report because they admitted that they saw and they left some remains. And I'm just concluded that they moved all that they needed to do because, I've said this before and again, because to them, this was a construction site. And so they moved enough to complete their project. And then they tried to again, and suggest that now they all gone and now we can move on, and we did not the right thing. We buried them over there at Oconee Hill. We put a memorial here. But the fact is that I would never be at peace with this, but I would certainly never be at peace with this in my lifetime, as long as that building is still treated in that area is still treated as just, a classroom or administrative building. It's a burial ground. And I would hope that people would, come to understand what that means, and so that it can be properly respected. So, and I said this to some university, where I said it to a University of Georgia, I don't call names, official in the last 2 weeks, that one day, and it probably won't be in my lifetime, it will happen. Someone at the University of Georgia will recognize that this is not the proper thing to do, and will do the right thing for that area. And of course, well, it's not of course, but I was told that there are some things in the works from the university level to give more proper recognition to that area. But again, it's just not right for that building to be sitting there on enslaved people and treated kind of as routine. So,
You're absolutely right about the architect's report, the architect's report, where they admitted it.
Right, they admitted it, exactly, yes.
Yeah. The other thing that I mean, there's so much that bothers me about it, but you also mentioned something else that is not talked about a lot, is that the remains were taken and they were actually, as I understand it, used in a kind of classroom activity, or they were used for instructional purposes.
Right.
And that was
and it's been a rough. Yeah, that was one of the first time where I always knew that they didn't get it. But to say that they were kind of excited about the prospect of having found human remains, and they were more interested in having the students have this experience of studying them. And I was clear from the beginning that I just didn't appreciate that, because I didn't see that as being rocks or something to be studied. Those were human remains, and for a wrong possibility, they may have been some related to me, and if they were not related to me, still that was not the proper thing to do. It's just a matter of how African American or Black folks are oftentimes treated in this country, and so it's a disrespect. And so I couldn't, and I've said this too, because of course we all have a lot of personal turmoils in our lives. And at that time, I was going through something that was particularly difficult. It would have been easier not to get into all this.
Yeah, I hear you, Fred. I hear you. You my champion. Linda, you want to? I saw you kind of nodding when Fred was talking about it as a enslaved people's burial ground. Did you have something else you want to add to that?
Again, to me, the insensitivity of the reinterment is a huge concern for me. I don't share Fred's passion about the study of the remains. I think it's so important to learn what we can about our ancestors. I look at my family now, I look at our family now, and it's a huge family, and I look at the diseases that we're carrying and the things that are happening, and I want to understand that better so that we can maybe do some other things. So I don't share that particular piece of passion. The thing that disturbs me most is, one, to subject the employees of this institution to walk into work and see these remains without having prepared them for what they were going to see. That is inhumane. The indignity of that is just appalling to me. And I met one of these workers at the Baldwin Hall building when I went over, probably to meet you, Joe, for something, I can't recall. But she said to me, she says, it was the most difficult thing I've ever experienced. And she looked at the wall and she pointed to the wall and she says, there are more remains behind this wall. And she says, every day I have to walk in here. And she says, no one, even after all of this, has said anything to us, to say, we're sorry that you're experiencing this every day. Are you having trauma? What is happening here? So even in our K through 12 schools, we handle trauma. And so because we're not recognized necessarily as human or even deserving or even equal in statute or even sharing the same emotions as the majority population in this county, these people, their needs weren't attended to. And so to me, it is like, every time I hear things like that, it just puts me in mind of the pictures that I've seen of the whippings that slaves endured when they broke a rule and everybody was forced to watch. And so I get this parallel here that says, here are these awful indignities being suffered by our people. And so nothing's changed. We're watching it. We are still watching them whip us. We are watching them put a knee on our neck. We are still watching. And it is time for us to do something very different about that. And so in order to do that, we have got to bring the humanity of the Black people and the brown people and the different people to the table to say they're people. And let's start there. Let's start there with recognizing that these are people. And the do unto others, that's the rule. Let's go to that golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Let's start there and see if we can't do something different. Fred, I'm so sorry that this was difficult.
Well, I'm good, man. I'm good. But I was thinking too, because you and I, we disagree about some things and a lot of things sometimes. But to me, I just have a real difficult time thinking that might be my great grandmama jawbone. Yeah. Right. That these students got in their hands. They're working and they're studying it. So that's hard for me.
But I want the DNA so we can actually know, because if we know, now we can go and get that box that our great grandmother's bone is in, and we can get that and bring it to her descendants.
Right.
bury them together. There's nothing more beautiful than going through that Oconee Hill Cemetery and hearing, I think it's Amy that does the, Amy Andrews who does the tours there. But to hear her tell the stories of the great lengths that families went to bring their loved ones home for burial, into their burial places, that is the story I want to experience. I want to be able to connect with the people that I came from.
Yeah, yeah. Phaidra and Kyle, I want to see where you all are after hearing that. Phaidra.
Yeah, hearing from them, definitely, they're speaking on things that really we had front of mind in the center of our work. I think sometimes we get lost in meetings and stuff like that, but really at the heart of it is like, who is at the front of your mind in this moment? Is it the community? Is it the enslaved people? Or is it a bottom line? Is it your PR? You know, is it your public facing image? That's the question, like, what is driving you as a leader in the University of Georgia? What are we pushing for? I think at this point I will share my screen, although I have definitely skipped some slides. What we hope, necessarily, when we speak with administration, we have had opportunities to speak with them. We want to create a scenario where this sort of response does not happen again, where that sort of scenario is prevented in the future, because we are not done reckoning with the past at the University of Georgia. We are still, like Linda Davis was saying, we are still in the past in a lot of ways, still dealing with that. And so we hope getting the University of Georgia to, one, acknowledge the past fully with the truth instead of being boxed into a corner and then releasing the truth. I think some people in the Q&A were asking, like, what would a proper acknowledgement look like? We are looking for a bold affirmation, like truly acknowledging the university's role in white supremacy, centering enslaved people, you know, their presence, their humanity, affirming a commitment to restoring these harms, recognizing the humanity of not just African Americans, but like the community, the Athens community, the workers that are making everything happen. Being transparent, it's a huge one. It was a huge failure during this entire thing, like talking to community members, talking to workers who were involved, soliciting the opinions of people with the experience, people who knew. I mean, a lot of you mentioned, as soon as you heard, you knew, okay, those are probably enslaved people. You know, they've been reached out, if you've been consulted all that time, I think a lot of those missteps would never have happened. Workers' rights, like we often see a through line. I think Linda Davis touched on this too, the exploitation of African Americans back then, enslaved people back then. You can draw a connection to how workers are being treated right now. Paying them a living wage. We are pushing for a $15 minimum wage. Protecting them in the middle of a pandemic so that they have, they can get access to testing, that they can get the leave that they need, that they can care for their loved ones. These are not radical things that we're pushing for. These are baseline treatment, trying to just bridge a connection with the community. You know, there is a lot of work being done, and you'll hear from administrators that there are things being done, you know, to restore harms, but the transparency piece of it, can we know what you're working on? Can you solicit community members' advice on that stuff? Can we get the meeting notes from the meetings y'all are working in? How did you choose the people who are going to be doing this work? That's what the transparency piece is all about. And recruitment, well, I'm sure a lot of you might be aware at this point, but about a third of the state of Georgia is African American, but only 8% of the students are, only 5% of the faculty, less than 10% of leadership is. And when you bring in people from different racial groups, different voices are going to be heard. There are going to be people in the room who say, wait a minute, you know, that's not respectful to people's ancestors. Or like, who are we centering here? Like, who do we need to talk to? To us, it's critical to moving things forward at the university. We've seen a lot, like there's a lot of community members, and I think someone mentioned this in the Q&A too, who have embraced this, who are behind this, and a lot of work is being done, like this amazing symposium. But again, like that's not coming from the top. That is your work, you know, pushing this forward. And so what we are looking for with these endorsements, with this collaboration, is leadership, buy-in from the administration to push this forward. If we're going to say that we're doing this after the summer of 2020, it was like, we're turning a new leaf, it's the 60th anniversary, we're going to right these wrongs, then we need to be bold about it. I'm going to skip this because I don't think that we have time to go into all the details, but we're hoping for more courage, and we're here to hold the administration accountable. We wanted to make sure that we touched on the fact that we're hosting a protest on May 12th at 6 p.m. at the Arch. You can get more details from us about what we've been up to and how we want to push these demands forward, and we hope to see all of you there. We also have some links that Kyle has that he can include if you want to learn more about us. But at the end of the day, I mean, we have such a overhead view of our demands. It's a very basic set of the demands. It's things we know that the UGA can do now that is cost effective, that will get us started, because you can't fix a problem that you haven't acknowledged. You can't fix a problem if you haven't involved the right voices from the community. However, like Mr. Fred Smith and Ms. Linda Davis were talking about earlier, it's bigger than that. It's more than that. It's real people involved in this. It's real involvement involved in this, and it takes everybody in the community to really change the culture here. So for example, like spreading the word. I think it's unbelievable that I as a student did not hear about this for years once I got in, and outreach to the community. I know UGA students, a lot of them are very involved in the community, but like if you're a student watching this, like talking to each other, even in context where you don't necessarily know what everyone is thinking, like all of us can be more involved to support people who make our educational experience what it is, because they're around and they deserve our support.
Kyle, is there anything that Phaidra didn't cover in the presentation that you want to add to, or?
Yeah, Phaidra did a wonderful job. But I'll just emphasize the first two categories of our demands that you saw, acknowledgement and transparency. We wanted to focus on those specifically as the primary, as the first two, because of all of the work that we've seen before, whether it's with Below Baldwin or Town or the workers, United Campus Workers, and what they've been calling for many years. The first thing is always acknowledgement. If the university can't acknowledge and just say, matter of fact, that this is happening and this is what is wrong, then there's no way that they can move on and then actually start rectifying these things. And so that's why acknowledgement has always been the first thing that we always talk about when centering any of our demands, because we don't think that these problems can be solved until the university explicitly says that these things are a problem. And that's, I mean, I think it's difficult for them to do that, because once they acknowledge it's a problem, then they have to actually find a solution. So it's easier to just say, no, this isn't a problem, we're just gonna not do anything about it. But we've always maintained that that's the most important thing. And then once you've acknowledged that, and then you start looking for solutions, transparency in all of those processes, like Phaidra was saying, whether you're coming up with committees or coming up with discussions, those always need to be transparent, especially inclusive of the community members that this is impacting, like Ms. Davis and Mr. Smith have been talking about. And so that's why those are the first two demands that we always talk about. And then we flow to workers' rights and recruitment, because those are the after effects of the racial injustice that has been prolonging for so long. But until you have acknowledgement and transparency of addressing those issues, we don't really think that you can move on. And so that's kind of what we've been calling for.
Mm-hmm. Joe, I want to give you a chance to weigh in, and then I'll take the questions. We have quite a few.
Yeah, sure. I'll just weigh in real quick. Yeah, I think it's amazing. Like, I've listened to Fred and Linda probably for hours talk through stories, and they're still saying things that I haven't heard before. I'm sure there's hours more of that. But since y'all are talking about service and maintenance workers at Baldwin Hall, that got me thinking, connected with the Town movement for redress right now. one of the Lennon residents that's been involved in that movement, Geneva Johnson, I believe it was her mother actually worked at Baldwin Hall. And we've seen similar responses from the university to the Lennon resolution and the Lennon demands. So this just similar responses there. And I just want to like fully like the transparency thing is so important. I really appreciate Phaidra and Kyle, like what y'all are saying about that and the work y'all are doing with regard to that. And I just really hope to see more like open community meetings, like, and not on campus. I mean, maybe some on campus, but like in community spaces, like,
Yeah.
like, and where like Black Athenians like decide on the conditions for the meeting. And it's just a shared like space where just that true like substantive like robust community consultation can happen, and not like some one-off thing, but just like a recurring events. And a lot of white folks and white institutions are gonna have to give up some wealth, property, and land at some point here. I mean, that's just gonna have to happen going forward. So yeah, last thing I'll say.
Linda, I think you have a correction you want to make.
Yes, I do. I'm so sorry, Charlotte. Oh my goodness. Charlotte Marshall is the tour guide for the Oconee Hill Cemetery. And you owe it to yourself to take a tour of that cemetery with her. You walk away with a whole appreciation for heritage, for connectedness, for how important it is for people to remain as a family unit. And so that's a big deal for me. So yeah, definitely. And thank you, Amy. Amy, I don't even remember where I met you now, but because my mind is just not there. But I wanted to make that correction. And to piggyback on what Joe just shared with us, we're working toward that. And so I think that, there's an expectation sometimes that one Black person can speak for the entire race. That's just never going to be true. It's not true now. It's never been true. And so the goal is to make sure that we can get all of these different voices at the table. And we won't always agree, and there's no requirement that we agree. It is important that we be heard. And I think that's where I want to see us move. And that is the work of the community agenda. So that's not part of the work of the community agenda.
We have quite a few compliments here, Linda. Linda is a national treasure. Linda is great. So that's good. You're so right, Linda. It seems like many of these questions, if I can combine a few, please indulge me, attendees. All of them are important, and thank you for sending them in. But every other question is, why do we think President Moorhead and others are not responding in a certain way, especially with a fuller acknowledgement or apology? That seems to be what everyone is asking. Why has the university responded in the way that it has and been so stingy with the acknowledgement, or, as someone has pointed out, a couple of people use specifically the word apology?
So why do we have a civil war? Don't make this difficult, because it's not. It's President Moorhead represents an institution. So he really doesn't have a voice.
I think Kyle and Joe are sorry.
Yeah, so he has to, it takes work for him to get an okay to say something like that. So that's coming thanks to the work that's continuing. But yeah, I'm not as sensitive about those kinds of questions as maybe some people are, but I've just been around long enough to know that when you're carrying that much responsibility, you don't really have a voice. It's what your boss says.
Well, what I've heard quietly from staff members is that they're genuinely puzzled that UGA, through its handling of this, has stepped on its own toes so many times. And it's actually in the best interest of the university, first of all, be more transparent, and also to hear people. Look at the way in which they did the memorial. They kept everything very closed. Same thing with the initiative. None of us who were involved with Baldwin were invited to participate on those committees,
I
right?
believe that. I think they believe that they did exactly right. They did talk to some people in the community. And so the question that I heard was, we don't know which people we need to talk to. So they talk to the people that they always talk to. And so I won't blame those people either. I think that the challenge here is, until we get to the root of why we even had to have the conversation, nothing changes. There should not have been a need to have a meeting to talk about displaced remains, right? If we valued the people that we were digging up, they would have known what to do. If they could relate to those people, if it were their grandparents, if it were their ancestor, they wouldn't have tolerated that. And so it's just that simple. When all of us have equal rights, when all of us are actually seen as people, the decisions start to change immediately. And then so the work for the university, I would say, and I think I saw that in one of the questions too, is to go through and take the Jim Crow laws out of our state. Let's work on getting rid of those things that were holding up segregation, that were holding up separation, that were holding up being able to deny people access to things because of their color that's been masked or hidden in some other language. So it's a lot of work to be done.
Phaidra, were you going to weigh in on that? I think I might have interrupted you.
Oh no, I think I was interrupting someone else, and I'll be quick, but I think Kyle and Joe touched on this, right? Like acknowledging dramatic harms, like repairing dramatic harms requires dramatic change. If you acknowledge that the land from the university was stolen, you might have to give some of that up. If you acknowledge that some of the wealth from the university was stolen, you might have to give some of that up. And it's a lot easier to have conversations and listening sessions and symbolic gestures than to really reverse those trends. Like our demands are really the beginning of a long walk, like acknowledging those harms, but they understand, I suppose, what's on the other side of this. And it takes, like Mrs. Davis was saying, really valuing people to understand that cost is worth it, and to have the courage to stand against. I mean, there are some powerful forces that administration has to contend with. Like we're in a university system, we have a governor, we have a board of regents, and we have a legislature. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to like, what do you value? What is most important, and how are we moving forward as a university? I'll leave it at that.
Paul Schneeberger has raised this question, and we have kind of debated this, those of us who talk about reckoning and redress. He says, would an apology make them liable? You know, the notion of the apology is more symbolic, that it actually involves that there's a kind of legal weight to an apology. So I think that kind of, the question kind of answers it. Yes, I think. But it just really depends. Note how carefully worded the US Senate and Congress apologies for Jim Crow and slavery were. Notice how with other schools, they're very careful in how they apologize. And I really think it has something to do with the legal significance. So, I mean, that's partly it, but I also think, I'm not even sure that, that is even at the top of their is something that they're thinking about. Oh, Joe, I wanted to, Below Baldwin really changed things for me. Below Baldwin was a great documentary. I didn't know anything about it. There was a lack of organization, but Below Baldwin folks are changing that, right? So I wanted to show you some love. Joe is here. Failure to see part of the problem. University celebrates desegregation, but refuses to acknowledge its history of racial violence. I know that's right. Any final comments? Yeah, more on Moorhead. Yeah, I think we kind of, some of the questions are kind of repeating, but Fred, I'm glad you're back.
Yeah, I disappeared there. I don't know what, I had some technical problem. I had to come back in on my phone.
Okay.
Getting some feedback.
But anyway, as far as, you know, the apology, people can give you an apology and not mean it. So to me, there's more, I guess, more important things than the apology. And those are those things in terms of recruitment, in terms of what the university does, and in terms of working with the community and neighborhoods, and working with education and doing something about impact on affordable housing and wages and all of that. Those things, I mean, they could say they apologize and not mean it. So show me that you mean it. So I'm not, I mean, apology and acknowledgement, they probably would say they've done that already. But again, it's I'm looking for and hope that I can see some other signs. And I have, if I am to believe what I'm reading and seeing, they are beginning to do some things. So not enough yet, but they are starting to do some things. So in the right direction.
You really inspired me. I mean, this whole experience, you know, it's really taken me low. When I first found out, I just couldn't be, I'm like, oh, this is my employer. You know, I was so angry and so upset. And I've had moments when I've cried out of frustration, out of, you know, feeling really humiliated the way they treated us. And yet, you know, every time I turn on my cell phone, there's one word that comes up, and it's fight. That's all sometimes I know how to do, fight through the real low points, and commit to doing that. And you all, the work that you all have done helps me. You just don't know. So I thank you personally.
Well, I thank you, because as you know, you were there from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna give a shout out to others at UGA as well, who were brave enough to stand up from the beginning, particularly some of your co-workers in the history department, but there have been others from other departments as well who stood up for the right thing. And so you are my hero. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, shout out to Dr. Valerie Babb, who's now at Emory. I mean, she was way out front.
Yes.
For her, Chris Pizzino documenting everything, you know, it's just, we've had a good collective response, and I want to see that continue.
Right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
All right.
I appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
attendees. Take care, everyone.
So much.